Hey everybody, this is Dark Guardsman. We're back with another status update on the 1.12 update for ICBM Classic. As most of you probably already know, the 1.12 version's been going pretty good. We have a version out that works both server and client. You pretty much can play with it as is. But over the last week-ish, I've been working on stripping away a large portion of code that was required to make ICBM Classic work. What I've effectively done, for those who haven't seen Twitter, I've made ICBM Classic standalone. So a lot of people have been pushing for this, a lot of people have been asking for this. And I finally kind of caved, not because I was being asked, but because there really was no need to depend on VoltzEngine for the longest time. Even in 1.7, we really didn't need the dependency. And it more or less was there because the amount of work required to get it to be standalone was more than we were willing to stick into the mod. It's effective, especially since we wanted to push the normal ICBM, which was meant to be ICBM 2, and not be pushing the ICBM Classic, but that policy's kind of changed, as I'm going to be working on the Classic version as much as I will be working on the regular version, trying to get it all polished out, working, and everything else. Because of that, I've decided, hey, that VoltzEngine wasn't necessary, and I removed the dependency on it over the last few days. Have got the Coding Lib dependency removed now, so the package is self-contained. There's no external dependencies, it's pretty lightweight. There's still a lot of work needs done. I still got to go through and re-add all the event systems. I still got to go through and boil down more code. So we have a really heavyweight radar system and a really heavyweight radio system that were used by VoltzEngine to allow support for just about everything. It's used by quite a few mods in order to function. For the case of ICBM Classic, it's not really necessary, as it's a lot of code for something really simple, so that's probably going to get boiled down to a lot more basic version. Same with the multi-block code, which I have yet to update. We're still working on that, getting that functioning. So that will eventually get updated and then boiled down to a much more simplified version, especially when we come over here. Well, actually, let's not even bother running over there. I'll just pull out the blocks in order to show this. So we have only really 3 multi-blocks. We have the launcher, the frame, and the EMP tower, and eventually we'll have the radar, which will also be multi-block as well. So this has only got 1 multi-block above it, although they're not updated yet, so they're not showing up. This has 2 multi-blocks above it, and of course this one's got 3 on each side. So for the multi-block system, we have a really complicated system that handles this. And the reason it was complicated is because, once again, in 1.7, a lot of dependencies, a lot of different flexibility, and you get mods like ICBM 2 that have huge multi-block structures in order to function. And for something like Classic, we don't really need that. So what's really likely going to happen is, once I get the multi-block code boiled down, these two are probably going to get a very simplified version of the multi-block code to work. Because, once again, they're only stacking blocks above it. This is the only one that'll probably get a little bit more complicated, because not only do we have blocks to either side, if there's a chunk border between here, I gotta calculate for the chunk border so we don't end up A, breaking the multi-block structure because the one chunk is missing, and B, don't orphan chunk load a chunk in order just to validate the structure still works. So that's going to be another thing to boil down. A lot of the remote systems, which all use the radio system, so the remote detonator and the laser detonator use a radio message system. They don't actually even connect to the system. So by system, I mean these screens. So the screens actually act as a radio receiver, and they will receive radio messages. So as long as you pop off the radio messages, these guys will work and function and do what they're supposed to do. So these 2 guys pop off radio messages. One pops off a fire missile with location, and the other one just pops off a fire missile. So these get broadcasted out, do their thing, and everything else. So this is another system I kind of want to boil down because it's overly complicated for ICBM Classic. I may leave it somewhat still API driven, because there is a necessity to having a little bit of openness for mod compatibility. Specifically, if somebody was to come in and build, say, like a block that could trigger these guys remotely, that would be definitely a thing I would want to leave open. That's the whole reason why the radio system was built as broad range as possible, because you could just pop string messages back to each other. So you can go simply, hey, I want to launch a missile, and as long as you passed in the correct information, this thing would actually launch and actually fire off the launcher. So that's another system that gets boiled down. There's actually a ton of systems that get boiled down. Outside of just the code, we do actually finally have got another texture artist in here. So Archadia, which was one of our older texture artists that worked with us back in like 2013, 2014, has actually gone through and redid all the grenades for us. I don't have them currently loaded because I'm working on the backend code. He apparently has done all the carts for us. He will be doing boats for us. That's a new feature that will be getting added here eventually, is we're going to have bomb boats actually in the mods. So you'll be able to push a boat out, and I'm thinking what we're going to do is attach it to a remote detonator and fire it off. He's also probably going to help me fix a lot of the textures of models for everything else. He's going through and doing all the recipes for us. So once we get the recipes done, I'm probably just going to go ahead and push a beta version, and I'm just going to say it's buggy because we'll move to a release system here eventually, where release will be the version where I say is actually bug-free, beta would be stable enough to do stuff with, and alpha is use at your own risk. So that's what system we're going to probably move to with ICBM Classic. On another note, with all these changes that are going on, there's a likelihood I may not actually backport for 1.8 and 1.9. I'm still doing research into this, but I'm going to be using the capability system, which is a system that was implemented at some point. I don't know when it was implemented. So it really depends on what version that was implemented, is how far back we're going to backport, but I'm going to be using that a lot more in the current version to replace a lot of our older code. We have a lot of inventory code, power code, a lot of stuff that's overly complicated for the needs of doing stuff. I can show a couple examples here real quick. So a few of the API pieces that I actually did drag with me from VoltzEngine was the, let's see real quickly in here. So the buffer system, which Minecraft or Forge has its own buffer system in here. So I'm gonna look at that and see if I can just use that system. I may keep mine just because I don't think the Forge energy system has been around that long. But we have things like this. So this could be replaced by a capability. So instead of going iEnergy provider on a tile or an item, I could simply go, okay, has capability iEnergy buffer, and then goes get energy buffer, and it will return me an energy buffer object rather than using the provider class. Same thing goes for our inventory code, which should be probably down here. I've been moving stuff around, so I'm a little lost on where I've put everything. But we have things like iInventory provider, which does the same thing, and this can now be replaced by a capability and gotten rid of. The only part I actually do want to keep, though, is the on-inventory change. This is how we do all of our packet code. So when you stick a missile inside the thing, it triggers this on-inventory change and then triggers a packet to update the client. We also got external inventory stuff. This is probably going to stick around simply because this is kind of nice. I like my external inventories, even though people are like, oh, you're using iInventory and you should get rid of that. I like how this works, and I'm going to probably keep using it because of that reason. Outside that, definitely more work needs to be done. I definitely got to go through and clean up all the GUIs. I've already gutted like 90% of the GUI code, but there's still a lot more to get rid of because, well, there's still a lot of junk in the bottom of specifically the GUI stuff here. There's a lot of empty string calls that aren't being used. There's a lot of field calls that aren't being used. I got rid of a lot of the draw calls, but there's still stuff in here like draw scaled rec with width. We don't use it. Although we probably will eventually because of things like the screen have a power gauge at the bottom that I do want to replace with an actual thing. Speaking of GUIs, I got to fix them. Most people are familiar with the older GUIs that look like... See if we can actually find a picture of this. So the GUIs did get switched a little bit here. This is what the GUI should look like, so we're going to switch back to that probably and get that all set up and cleaned up and working. I might scale the texture down a little bit. It's a little overly detailed for Minecraft. So we'll get that taken care of. We'll probably get Archie to hit up on that. And that's about it. That's the update for this. This builds will probably be out later tonight for this version, which will be standalone. I'll be putting information up on the curse page to note that it is now standalone and use at your own risk. Specifically, use at your own risk because I'm probably going to rewrite all the inventory stuff for all the tiles. So if particularly the launcher is the one that's at risk. So if I rewrite the inventory stuff, your missiles could disappear, and if you complain, well, you've been warned. It's alpha version. That's the only one that has an inventory. Actually, a couple of these do have inventories, but you just can't access them. Like this one should have battery slots on it. It doesn't have it. And I believe the other tiles do also have battery slots. I'll be adding code in at some point in the future, by the way, to turn off the power usage of this stuff. So if you end up wanting to use ICBM Classic without a power mod installed, there will be code in there eventually for that. Radar will probably be getting a little bit of an overhaul at some point as well to fix this grid and make it look a little nicer. There'll probably be a few other quality improvements, like for example, getting rid of the ability to type in characters in here will be in there eventually. And I'm probably going to work on maybe cleaning these up and making them a lot easier to use. The GUI is a bit on the bulky side. What I might do is I might do what I do with a lot of the 1.7 mods and add buttons over here to switch between tabs. So we'll have a settings tab, and then we'll have a radar view tab. That way I can bring this up much larger and get a lot more detail on the screen for you to use. Outside that, I got nothing else to cover, so I'll see you guys later with more videos and more updates and everything else.